13%. That's all I requested. Christopher Lane's laughter bounced off the mahogany-paneled walls of his executive suite like I'd delivered the punchline to some elaborate joke. You're asking for a 13% raise? After 15 years? He couldn't maintain composure long enough to finish his thought before another wave of amusement overtook him. I remained standing there, portfolio in hand, containing every process optimization, every cost reduction initiative, every innovation I'd engineered over a decade and a half at Apex Systems Manufacturing. My name is Chloe Harrison and I'm 44 years old. Senior Systems Architecture Engineer, and until that precise moment, the type of professional who believed exceptional performance eventually receives appropriate compensation. Former Air Force electronics specialist turned civilian engineer, I'd dedicated my entire professional trajectory to the conviction that superior work earns recognition through merit. I joined Apex at 29, fresh from military service with ambitious aspirations about creating manufacturing solutions that genuinely mattered. The predictive maintenance algorithm I architected saved the company $3.4 million last fiscal quarter alone, I stated, maintaining steady vocal control. The automated quality verification system for the Riverside Electronics contract reduced error rates by 92%. Christopher waved dismissively as though swatting away an insignificant insect. Everyone's expendable, Chloe. Even someone with your tenure. He reclined in his executive leather chair, that Princeton MBA smugness plastered permanently across his features. If you believe you're worth more compensation, you're welcome to explore alternative employment opportunities. That moment crystallized exactly what needed to happen next. See, what Christopher fundamentally misunderstood was the daily reality occurring on our production floor. While he attended board meetings discussing strategic synergies and market positioning, I worked directly alongside the technicians operating our equipment. Raymond Tucker had been managing the primary circuit board assembly line for 14 years. Lisa Chen. Wait, I need to change that surname. Lisa Bennett ran our precision testing with an expertise that could identify microscopic defects that our expensive inspection equipment frequently overlooked. These weren't merely employees from my perspective. They represented the individuals who transformed my theoretical systems into functional reality. If you're new here and enjoying these powerful stories, make sure to hit that subscribe button and stay tuned for more. Let me know in the comments what part of today's story touched you most. My predictive maintenance protocols didn't originate from academic business theory. They emerged from observing Raymond struggle with equipment failure patterns during shift transitions. From watching Lisa identify problems our sophisticated testing apparatus consistently missed. From understanding that genuine innovation happens when you truly comprehend operational mechanics rather than just reviewing performance spreadsheets. The automated system I'd engineered for Riverside wasn't simply about efficiency statistics. It addressed reducing physical strain on our workforce while simultaneously improving output quality. The previous process required technicians to perform repetitive precision movements 300 times per shift. My redesign incorporated robotic assistance and improved workflow staging. Productivity increased 42%, but more significantly, workplace injuries dropped to effectively zero. I understand your position completely, I responded, closing my portfolio. Thank you for providing clarity regarding my value here. Listen, Chloe. His voice adopted that artificial concern executives deploy when they're pretending empathy. You're competent at your function, but you're fundamentally a support role. The executive board barely recognizes your name. That's simply how business operates. Support role. Interesting characterization. Because apparently designing the automated systems that actually manufacture our products doesn't qualify as essential business operations. I walked back toward my workstation past the glass-walled offices occupied by managers who'd been employed here half my tenure. My desk sat in the corner of the engineering department, surrounded by the testing equipment and development terminals I'd personally specified and configured. The space I'd called my professional home for 15 years. From my workstation, I maintained clear sight lines through the windows overlooking our production facility where second shift was beginning operations. My computer monitor displayed the quarterly company newsletter featuring Christopher's revolutionary manufacturing transformation that had secured the Riverside Electronics partnership. My revolution. My 70-hour week sustained over 9 months. My solution that reduced their manufacturing costs by 38% and established Apex as their preferred supplier. The article included a professional photograph of Christopher shaking hands with Riverside's chief procurement officer. Zero mention of the engineer who'd actually architected the systems making that partnership viable. I opened my desk drawer and extracted a weathered leather journal. Inside contained my personal project documentation accumulated over the years. Concepts I'd developed at home, processes I'd refined using my personal laptop during weekends, innovations I'd meticulously documented with precise dates and development logs. Systems the company had implemented because I'd been excessively eager to demonstrate my capabilities, overly willing to contribute without formal intellectual property acquisition documentation. I flipped to my notes from 5 years earlier. The predictive maintenance protocols that became foundational to our entire operational framework. At the top of the page, in my own handwriting, personal project, advanced manufacturing diagnostics, developed at home, initiated April 22, 2019. What Christopher didn't realize, what Apex's legal department had never bothered investigating, was that I'd never formally transferred ownership rights to my most valuable innovations. The standard employment contract covered work completed during company hours utilizing company resources. My breakthrough processes were extensively documented as personal projects, developed during my own time using my own equipment. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd spent my Air Force years working on advanced avionics systems. Everything there centered on precision, reliability, and understanding that people's lives literally depended on getting technical details absolutely correct. When I transitioned to civilian manufacturing, I brought that identical mindset. Every system I designed wasn't merely about numbers on quarterly reports. It was about creating solutions that actually functioned in real-world environments. I pulled out my phone and scrolled to a contact I'd saved but never contacted. Elena Foster, Chief Operations Officer at Vertex Industrial Solutions, our primary competitor. She'd reached out repeatedly over recent years through LinkedIn and industry conferences. Her most recent message, sent 5 months ago: "The opportunity remains available whenever you're ready, Chloe. We need innovators who understand genuine manufacturing operations." My finger hovered over the call button. 15 years of dedication screamed at me to stop. Then I remembered Christopher's laughter. I pressed call. "Elena Foster speaking. This is Chloe Harrison from Apex Systems. I believe it's time we had that conversation you mentioned. Chloe, I was beginning to think you'd never reach out. Are you available for dinner this evening?" 4 hours later, I sat across from Elena at Harrington's downtown. She'd secured the reservation with a single phone call. The establishment featured crisp white linens and professionally attired wait staff. Not my typical dining environment, but Elena appeared completely comfortable here. "I've been monitoring your work for years," Elena said, sampling her entree. "The dramatic improvements in Apex's efficiency metrics, the patent applications that mysteriously emerged following gaps in your conference presentations. Those predictive maintenance systems for Riverside were genuinely revolutionary. How did you determine that was my work?" Elena smiled knowingly. "Because Christopher Lane couldn't engineer a solution to a basic circuit problem, much less develop sophisticated manufacturing protocols. When we attempted reverse engineering your systems and failed, that's when I realized we needed the architect behind them." She wasn't incorrect. Christopher's background consisted entirely of finance and strategic planning. His father had established Apex back in the 1980s, and Christopher had grown up expecting to inherit the enterprise. When his father retired 4 years ago, Christopher stepped directly into the CEO position. Never spent a single day on an actual production line, never understood how the machinery actually operated. "What exactly is your offer?" I asked directly. "VP of Systems Architecture, double your current compensation, equity participation, your own dedicated engineering team." She leaned forward intently. "But more importantly, recognition. Your name on your patents, appropriate credit for your innovations." The recognition aspect resonated differently than the financial compensation. Don't misunderstand, doubling my salary would be transformative. But having my name properly attributed to the work I'd actually accomplished? That held profound significance. I placed my journal on the table between us. "I have comprehensive documentation proving these systems originated as personal projects. Apex implemented them, but never formally acquired the intellectual property rights." Elena's eyes widened as she grasped the full implications. That's quite a significant oversight on their legal department's part. Christopher doesn't value support roles, I said. Including legal oversight, apparently. We discussed technical specifics for another hour. Elena knew her material thoroughly. She'd started as a circuit design engineer herself before advancing into management. When I explained the automated calibration modifications I'd developed for precision component handling, she immediately understood the quality control implications. When I described the statistical analysis algorithms I'd written, she posed intelligent questions about data sampling intervals and confidence thresholds. This represented what I'd been missing at Apex. Someone who actually comprehended the engineering foundations behind business decisions. 3 weeks. That's what I told her I required. 3 weeks to complete my current project obligations and ensure a professional transition. Elena agreed, though I could detect her eagerness to begin immediately. Vertex had been losing market position to Apex for the past 3 years, ever since my innovations had gone operational. Now she had an opportunity to reverse that trajectory. The drive home provided time for reflection. 15 years represents substantial tenure at one organization. I knew every corner of that facility, every quirk of every piece of equipment. I'd trained most of the current engineering staff personally. Hell, I'd helped design the workspace configuration when they expanded the facility in 2017. But loyalty requires reciprocity. I'd given Apex the most productive years of my career, and Christopher had just demonstrated that meant absolutely nothing to him. The following morning, I began preparing my transition documentation. Initial step involved cataloging everything I'd officially developed for Apex versus my personal projects. The company legitimately owned plenty of my work. Standard process improvements, equipment specifications, training documentation. But the core innovations that had transformed their manufacturing efficiency, those belonged to me. I spent the weekend reviewing my files both at work and at home. The pattern emerged clearly. Every major breakthrough had originated as a personal project. I'd developed the concept at home, tested on my personal laptop, then presented to work as a proposed improvement. Apex had been perfectly happy to implement my ideas, but they'd never bothered with the documentation to actually acquire them. My primary concern centered on the technicians on the floor. Raymond, Lisa, and the rest of the crew hadn't done anything wrong. They were dedicated professionals who simply wanted to perform their jobs and support their families. If Apex struggled after my departure, they'd be the ones suffering consequences. But I also knew that Vertex maintained a superior reputation for treating their workforce fairly. Elena had mentioned they were planning to expand their Ohio operations. Perhaps opportunities would exist for the quality people at Apex if circumstances deteriorated. Monday morning arrived with typical factory ambient noise. The 6 a.m. shift change, the mechanical hum of equipment starting operations, the familiar rhythms I'd been experiencing for 15 years. I walked through the facility before heading to my office, reviewing the weekend production numbers, greeting the early crew. Everything operated smoothly. The systems I'd designed were functioning exactly as intended. The Riverside production line was generating components at a 99.4% quality rate. The new robotic assists had eliminated the repetitive motion injuries that had plagued the precision assembly area. Material flow was optimized to the degree where we rarely experienced bottlenecks anymore. It represented quality work. Work I took professional pride in. And Christopher considered it expendable. I spent the next week quietly finalizing my documentation. Every personal project was cataloged with development dates, design iterations and implementation records. I made copies of all the email correspondence where I'd offered to let Apex formally acquire my innovations. Christopher's dismissive responses made particularly interesting reading now. The legal research consumed considerable time, but the conclusion was unambiguous. My personal intellectual property had never been transferred to Apex. They'd implemented my systems based on my recommendations, but they'd never completed any acquisition process. It represented sloppy corporate governance, the type of oversight that occurs when leadership doesn't value legal details. By the end of the week I had everything I needed. Documentation, legal clarity, and a plan for moving forward. Friday afternoon I composed my resignation letter. Saturday morning I called Elena Foster. "I'm ready," I said when she answered. "Excellent. Can you start Monday? Give me 3 weeks to do this professionally. But yes, I'm joining Vertex. There was satisfaction in her voice when she responded. Welcome to the team, Chloe. This is going to be transformative. Monday morning, I walked into Christopher's office with my resignation letter. He was reviewing his computer screen, probably analyzing the latest quarterly projections that looked favorable thanks to the systems I'd built. 3 weeks' notice, he said, barely glancing at the document. Where are you going? I considered being evasive, but decided honesty would have greater impact. Vertex Industrial Solutions. That got his attention. His head snapped up, eyes narrowing. Our competitor? That's unfortunate timing. We're in advanced negotiations with Riverside to expand our partnership. I know. I designed the manufacturing protocols for that proposal. Christopher's expression shifted from casual dismissal to genuine alarm. The color drained from his features as he realized the implications. We should discuss retention alternatives. Perhaps that raise you mentioned could be reconsidered. Vertex is offering double my salary plus VP position and equity participation. He forced a laugh, but it sounded hollow now. They're overcompensating. You'll be disappointed when reality sets in. We'll see, I said and departed. My final 3 weeks at Apex were peculiar. Word spread quickly that I was leaving for Vertex. Some colleagues were shocked. Others said they'd anticipated this eventually. Raymond Tucker pulled me aside on Tuesday. You really going to the competition, Chloe? Yes, Raymond. It's time. He nodded slowly. Can't say I blame you. Christopher's been taking credit for your work since day one. We all know who really designed these systems. That meant something. The technicians on the floor knew. They'd always known. I spent those final days completing my transition documents and training my replacement, a talented recent graduate named Kevin Phillips, fresh from MIT's engineering program. He was enthusiastic but apprehensive, which I understood. The systems he was inheriting were complex. The robotic calibration controls alone have 53 different parameters, I explained, walking him through the main assembly line. Each station is calibrated for specific component tolerances and operator workflows. You modify one setting without understanding the cascading effects, and you'll have production bottlenecks within 30 minutes. Kevin took notes frantically. How long did it take you to master all this? Years, I said honestly. But don't worry. The documentation is comprehensive, and the operators understand these systems thoroughly. Listen to them. They'll teach you things no engineering textbook ever could. I also quietly backed up all my personal project documentation and made copies of the email chains where I'd offered to let Apex acquire my innovations. Christopher's responses were particularly revealing. One from 2020 read, "Just implement it if it's effective. We'll handle the paperwork eventually." That paperwork had never materialized. On Thursday of my final week, I met with Andrew Stone, Apex's legal counsel, for the standard exit interview. Just routine documentation, he assured me, sliding papers across his desk. Non-compete agreement, confidentiality clauses, confirmation you're not taking company property. I reviewed everything carefully. The non-compete wasn't in my original employment contract and I wasn't signing it now. As for company property, I was taking only what belonged to me. I'm not signing the non-compete, I told Stone. It wasn't part of my original agreement. It's standard procedure now, he said, looking uncomfortable. Not for me. And regarding company property, I'm taking my personal intellectual property that was never formally acquired by Apex. What personal property? Stone's expression tightened. I opened my journal, showing him the dated entries. These manufacturing systems were developed on my personal time using my own resources. Apex implemented them but never completed any acquisition process. I have the documentation to prove it. Stone flipped through my journal, his face growing pale. These are the core systems we use for everything. Yes, they are, I said calmly. He stared at me, then at the journal. I need to make some calls. Of course, but my employment ends Friday and my personal property leaves with me. Friday afternoon arrived, overcast and humid, typical Ohio weather for late spring. I cleaned out my desk, said goodbye to the engineering team, and walked through the factory one final time. The machines hummed with the efficiency I'd helped create. The workers moved with the rhythm of processes I'd designed. It was quality work, even if Christopher had never appreciated it. Lisa Bennett was running precision tests on the Riverside line. She looked up when she saw me approaching. "Heard you're leaving us," she said. "New opportunities, Lisa. But these systems will keep running smoothly. You know them better than anyone." She smiled warmly. Take care of yourself, Chloe. And good luck with whatever comes next. I walked out of Apex Systems Manufacturing at 5:45 p.m., carrying a box with my personal items and 15 years of memories. My car started smoothly, same as always. Some things remain constant. Monday morning at Vertex felt like stepping into a different era. Their facility was newer, better organized, with modern equipment and clean work areas. Elena Foster met me at reception personally. Welcome to Vertex, Chloe. Ready to change the industry? My new office had windows overlooking their main production floor. Real windows, not the interior glass partitions I'd gotten accustomed to at Apex. I could see their current manufacturing setup, and immediately spotted areas for improvement. The material flow patterns were inefficient, creating unnecessary worker movement. The quality control stations were positioned wrong for optimal visual inspection. The robotic systems looked like they'd been installed by someone who'd read the manual but never actually used the equipment. Elena introduced me to my team, 11 engineers ranging from recent graduates to industry veterans. They were eager to learn what I'd brought from Apex, but I had bigger plans than just copying old systems. We're not here to recreate Apex's processes, I told them during our first team meeting. We're here to build something superior. Something that Apex can't match even if they tried. Over the next 2 months, we redesigned Vertex's entire manufacturing approach. The predictive maintenance principles I'd developed were just the starting point. We integrated machine learning diagnostics, improved worker ergonomics, and implemented real-time quality monitoring that caught defects before they became problems. The results were immediate and dramatic. Production efficiency jumped 34%. Operating costs dropped 27%. Quality metrics improved across every product line. But more importantly, workplace injuries fell to nearly zero, and employee satisfaction surveys showed significant improvement. Our sales team noticed the transformation. They started approaching clients with performance data that Apex couldn't match. The morning Riverside announced they were switching their contract to Vertex. My phone started buzzing. Christopher's name flashed on the screen 6 times before he left a message. Chloe, this is Christopher. We need to discuss consulting opportunities immediately. Apex is prepared to offer substantial compensation. Please call me back. I saved the message but didn't return the call. The irony wasn't lost on me. For months ago I'd asked for a 13% raise and got laughed at. Now he was talking about substantial compensation. 4 days later, Christopher was waiting by my car in the Vertex parking garage. The confident CEO swagger had vanished. He looked exhausted, older somehow. This is inappropriate, I said, maintaining my distance. You've put 250 jobs at risk, he said, his voice urgent. Apex is facing a crisis because of what you took. I didn't take anything that belonged to Apex. I took my personal intellectual property that Apex used without proper acquisition. Nobody will believe that. It looks like corporate theft. I have dated documentation of every project, every implementation, every conversation where ownership was never transferred. Your legal team never did their job properly. Christopher stepped closer. Name your price. Whatever Vertex is paying, we'll triple it. I thought about those 15 years sitting at my desk while he took credit for my work. About his laughter when I asked for basic recognition. You once told me everyone's expendable. Even someone with my tenure. I'm just following your business philosophy. The next quarter's results were devastating for Apex. Without the Riverside contract, they lost 45% of their revenue. Their stock dropped 52% in 7 weeks. The board started asking hard questions about how they'd become so dependent on systems they didn't actually own. Industry publications ran stories about Apex's mysterious technical collapse. Manufacturing Today called it a catastrophic loss of institutional knowledge. The Wall Street Journal described it as a case study in poor intellectual property management. Nobody mentioned Christopher's laughter in his executive suite, but the message was clear. Companies that don't value their talent pay the price eventually. Apex laid off 220 employees. I watched the announcement from my office while reviewing expansion plans for Vertex's new electronics division. Each name on the layoff list was someone I'd worked with, someone I respected. Raymond Tucker. Lisa Bennett. Quality professionals who didn't deserve to suffer for Christopher's arrogance. That's when Elena and I had a serious conversation about corporate responsibility. We can't just celebrate Apex's failure, I told her. These are real people with families and mortgages. What do you have in mind? She asked. Vertex launched Operation Opportunity the following week. We committed to interviewing every qualified former Apex employee. 4 specialized positions we couldn't fill immediately. We partnered with regional manufacturers to create placement services. 4 workers nearing retirement. We offered consulting contracts that provided bridge income until their pensions activated. Raymond Tucker became my lead technician for robotic systems installation. Lisa Bennett joined our quality control team as a senior inspector. Within 7 months, we'd hired 89 former Apex employees. The local business press called it innovative competitor displacement strategy, but for me it was just doing right by people who'd supported my work for years. Then came the lawsuit. Apex sued me for theft of intellectual property and corporate sabotage. Their legal team filed extensive documentation claiming I'd stolen proprietary manufacturing processes. Christopher gave interviews to trade publications about protecting American companies from industrial espionage. The case fell apart during discovery. My dated documentation proved every major innovation had originated as a personal project. The email chains showed Christopher explicitly dismissing the need for formal IP acquisition. Most damaging was a recorded board meeting where Christopher had boasted about getting brilliant engineering work without paying acquisition costs. The judge dismissed the case with prejudice, noting Apex's failure to secure proper ownership of innovations they'd implemented. The legal fees alone cost Apex another $1.2 million they couldn't afford. The morning after the dismissal, I received an unexpected visitor. Andrew Stone, looking considerably older than during my exit interview. I was let go last month, he said, sitting heavily in my office chair. Part of the final cuts. I'm sorry to hear that. Vertex is expanding our legal team if you're interested. He shook his head. That's not why I came. It's about your innovations, your documentation. I tensed. The court already ruled on that. I know, and they ruled correctly. Stone met my eyes. But there's something you should know. After you mentioned your personal projects in the exit interview, I went straight to Christopher. Showed him emails from years back where you'd offered to let the company formally acquire your work. You even suggested reasonable compensation terms. I remembered those emails now. I'd been trying to do the right thing, make everything official. Christopher replied, dismissing the need for formal acquisition. Stone continued. Said something like, just implement it if it's effective, we'll handle the paperwork eventually. When you left and Vertex started using your systems, he ordered me to sue you anyway. Despite knowing we had no case. Why are you telling me this now? Because what happened to Apex wasn't just about you taking your innovations elsewhere. It was about years of systematic arrogance. Christopher didn't just undervalue you. He treated everyone like replaceable parts. Legal, operations, engineering. When you left, it revealed how broken everything was. 7 months later, Apex filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. Christopher was forced to resign. The board brought in turnaround specialists, but it was too late. Vertex had captured most of their market share, and other competitors had moved into the gaps. The acquisition happened on a Tuesday morning. A private equity firm purchased Apex's remaining assets for 40 cents on the dollar. They kept the brand name but gutted the operational structure. Most of the remaining employees were let go within 60 days. I watched the news from my VP office at Vertex, looking out at our expanded manufacturing floor. My team had grown to 28 engineers. We held 22 patents with my name prominently listed. Industry awards lined my bookshelf. But the real satisfaction came from seeing Raymond Tucker training new technicians, watching Lisa Bennett mentor young quality inspectors, knowing that quality professionals found better opportunities. Elena walked into my office that afternoon holding a bottle of champagne. The Riverside contract extension just came through, she announced. 3 years, double the previous value. They specifically cited our quality metrics and innovation pipeline. We popped the champagne, but I didn't feel entirely celebratory. An entire company had collapsed, hundreds of jobs had been disrupted, all because one CEO couldn't recognize the value of the people actually doing the work. You're thinking about Apex, Elena observed. Hard not to. I worked there for 15 years. You didn't destroy Apex, she said firmly. Christopher's arrogance destroyed Apex. He just refused to be undervalued anymore. There's a difference. He was right intellectually. But emotionally it was more complicated. That evening I drove past the old Apex facility. The parking lot was mostly empty, just a few cars belonging to the skeleton crew maintaining the equipment until the acquisition finalized. The building that had been my professional home for 15 years looked abandoned, hollow. I thought about all the hours I'd spent there. The late nights debugging code, the weekends testing new algorithms, the satisfaction of watching my systems come to life on the production floor. I'd built something genuinely valuable there, something I was proud of. But I'd built it for people who didn't appreciate it. Who laughed when I asked for basic recognition. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if Christopher had just said yes that day in his office. If he'd approved my 13% raise and acknowledged my contributions. Apex would still be operational, those 220 people would still have their jobs, and I'd probably still be sitting at that desk in the corner of the engineering department. But that's not what happened. Christopher chose arrogance over appreciation, and that choice had consequences. The following week, I received an email from someone I didn't recognize. The subject line read, "Thank you from a former Apex employee. Ms. Harrison, you don't know me, but I worked in shipping at Apex for 8 years. I was part of the first round of layoffs after you left. I wanted you to know that everyone on the floor knew the truth about who really built those systems. We saw Christopher take credit for your work year after year. We saw how hard you worked and how little recognition you received. When you left and everything fell apart, some people blamed you. But most of us understood that you'd been holding that place together for years, and Christopher had been too arrogant to realize it. I found a new job at Vertex's shipping department thanks to your Operation Opportunity program, and I wanted to say thank you. Not just for the job, but for finally standing up for yourself. It taught a lot of us that we don't have to accept being undervalued. Best regards, Walter Chin." Wait, I said I couldn't use Chin as a surname. Let me fix that. Best regards, Walter Gibson. I read that email 3 times. Then I saved it in a folder I labeled, "Why It Mattered." Because that was the thing Christopher never understood. This wasn't just about intellectual property or competitive advantage or market share. It was about respect. About recognizing that the people who actually build things, who solve problems, who make innovations possible, those people have value beyond what shows up on a quarterly balance sheet. 6 months after the Apex acquisition, Vertex announced a major expansion. We were opening 2 new facilities, hiring 400 additional employees, and launching 3 new product lines. Elena was promoted to CEO, and I was offered the COO position. I accepted with one condition, that we formalize an innovation recognition program. Any employee who developed a significant process improvement or technological innovation would receive proper credit, fair compensation, and equity participation. Their names would be on the patents. Their contributions would be publicly acknowledged. Elena agreed immediately. "That's exactly the kind of culture we need to build," she said. The program launched the following quarter. Within the first year, we received 47 substantive innovation proposals from employees across all departments. 12 of them were implemented, resulting in efficiency improvements and cost savings that exceeded $5 million. But more importantly, employee retention jumped to 94%. People wanted to work somewhere their contributions were valued. Today my office walls display those 22 patents with my name prominently featured. But my favorite display is a framed photograph of the entire Vertex operations team taken at our annual meeting last month. Raymond Tucker is in the front row, Lisa Bennett is standing next to Elena, and everyone is smiling. These are people who found better opportunities because they were willing to take a chance on change. Because they refused to accept being undervalued. Sometimes young engineers ask me when they should stand up for themselves. My answer is simple. Don't wait 15 years like I did. Know your worth, document your contributions, and never let anyone convince you that exceptional work doesn't deserve recognition. But I also tell them something else. If you're going to walk away, do it professionally. Document everything, understand your legal rights, and make sure you're leaving for the right reasons. Don't let anger or hurt feelings drive your decisions. Let clarity and self-respect guide you instead. Because here's what I learned. Standing up for yourself isn't about revenge. It's about recognizing your own value and refusing to settle for less than you deserve. Christopher Lane taught me that lesson, though not in the way he intended. When he laughed at my request for a 13% raise, he thought he was putting me in my place. What he actually did was show me exactly how little he valued the work that kept his company running. That clarity was painful, but it was also liberating. Last month, I ran into Christopher at an industry conference. He looked smaller somehow, diminished. He was working as a consultant now, helping companies avoid the mistakes that had destroyed Apex. The irony was almost poetic. "Chloe," he said, approaching me cautiously. "I've wanted to reach out to apologize." I considered walking away but decided to hear him out. "I was arrogant," he continued. "I didn't understand what you'd built, what you meant to the company. I thought I could replace anyone, that systems were more important than people. I was wrong. As you were. For what it's worth, I'm sorry. I destroyed a lot of lives because of my arrogance, including my own." I looked at him, this man who'd laughed at my request for recognition, who'd dismissed my contributions as replaceable. Part of me wanted to feel vindicated, to enjoy his acknowledgement of failure. But mostly I just felt tired. "I appreciate the apology, Christopher. I hope you've learned from the experience." "I have." He paused, then added, "You built something remarkable at Vertex. I read about your innovation recognition program. That's the kind of leadership I should have provided." We stood there for a moment in uncomfortable silence. Then he nodded and walked away. Elena found me a few minutes later. "Was that Christopher Lane?" "Yes." "What did he want?" "To apologize, apparently." "How did that feel?" I thought about it. Honestly, it felt like closing a chapter. Not with satisfaction or vindication, but just with closure. That night, lying in bed, I reflected on the entire journey. 15 years at Apex, building systems that transformed their operations. 4 months of transition and uncertainty. 2 years at Vertex, building something even better. The numbers were impressive. Innovations implemented, patents filed, efficiency improvements, cost savings, employee satisfaction, market share captured. But the real measure of success wasn't in those metrics. It was in the fact that I'd stood up for myself when it mattered. That I'd recognized my worth and refused to accept less. That I'd used my skills to build something better, somewhere that valued what I brought to the table. 13%. That's all I'd asked for. A modest acknowledgement of 15 years of exceptional work. Christopher's laughter in response had seemed devastating in the moment. Looking back now, that laughter was the best thing that could have happened to me. It provided the clarity I needed to stop waiting for recognition that was never coming. It pushed me to document my value, understand my rights, and take control of my professional destiny. Sometimes the most powerful response to being undervalued isn't anger or revenge. It's simply proving them wrong. And sometimes the most important thing you can do is know when to walk away. 15 years of loyalty should mean something. When it doesn't, sometimes the most powerful response is recognizing your own worth and finding somewhere that does.